We are joined on this episode by an actor who's appeared in films including World Trade Center and Mystic River, TV series including Revenge and Gossip Girl. You can see him right now in South by Hit, The Last Stop in Yuma County, which is still currently playing in theaters as we speak, and in Paper Street Pictures' own A Creature Was Stirring, which is on VOD now to rent or buy. He is Connor Paolo. Connor, thank you so much for joining us on the program here.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Excited to talk to you, but before we get into your later work, we want to go all the way back to the beginning and ask how you got into film and entertainment. Was it a person, a particular piece of art that got you hooked?
Yeah, as much as this all happened before I was cognitive in any reasonable way. But I think the thing that really got me started was he's an artist by the name of Michael Counts, who in the mid 90s was doing, you could call experimental theater, but all theater is sort of experimental, so theater in mostly Brooklyn. But he did, I don't know what kind of style you'd call it, but Sleep No More uses this kind of style where there isn't a stage per se. The audience is ambulatory and moves through a large space. In Michael's case, it was almost always a warehouse in Dumbo, or I guess in Sleep No More's case, it's a hotel. But point being, the actors and the performers sort of perform a play or a story on a loop, and then the audience moves through the space and follows the story as they see fit. And I went to one of his productions at maybe 5 years old, I think, with my father, who I believe knew someone in his company. And I was fascinated by it, and I'm pretty sure I was the only child there. So I think, Michael I got to talking with my dad and was like, if he wants to do some shows with us, we'd love to have him. So he asked me about it, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I really enjoyed it. I always loved hearing stories and telling stories, and that's what acting was to me then, and still is to me today. But especially in that format that was so unstructured, at least in the traditional sense, really fit for I don't know what it is between a toddler and a preteen, but whatever the fuck that is. I really liked that. And then I think from there, I started taking acting classes because I guess my parents, I don't remember if I asked them to or if they just saw oh wow, he really likes this shit. Let's see if we can find a way for him to do it regularly. And then from that, in a showcase I was doing as I think I was 9 or 10. I got noticed by an agent and then started going on auditions and working, professionally in the industry. But that's sort of that's my memory of how it started, was just really being blown away by that kind of completely unrestrained theater.
It's got to be, something kinetic, frenetic like that at that age. But you said your father might have known somebody in it. Were both of your parents in the arts or in the industry in any capacity?
Yeah, they're both artists. My mother is a pianist and a vocal coach, brilliant piano player. And my father is a writer and also an unbelievably talented artist. And he worked both as a screenwriter and as a critic for many years for Variety in London, where he was living at the time. When I was growing up, neither of them were sort of engaged so much in the industry in terms of kind of doing their own thing. They were both sort of working in other capacities, but both practicing their art every day in the apartment. So I was always very close to two artists that I really look up to and respect.
That's amazing to be able to grow up in that type of environment. Was this in New York?
Yes, this was in Manhattan.
Got it. Were you always more drawn to the theater? When did that start transitioning towards film acting?
I think just, I loved movies growing up. I obviously still now. I don't think I had the words or the perspective on it at this point when I was a kid. But if I look at, I guess, the way I interact with media, I would say that I think film is my favorite way to tell a story. Whether it's in books or a TV show or a theater piece, I think the 90-minute to 2 hour, 2.5 hour visual story is my favorite way to consume a tale. So even as a kid, I would on Friday nights, I would always go right to the video store, and I would sit there for hours trying to decide what to sort of bring home with me. And then I'd spend the weekend just watching movies. So I never planned to get into film and theater because I think, I don't know, when you're a kid, like that's what you first have access to, just like school plays, things like that. So I think theater, and when you take acting classes, you can certainly do film acting classes, but most of them take place in a more theatrical setting. And the material you're doing is almost always from stage plays, or at least it was when I was training as a kid. So I didn't think about working in film and TV until I got an agent. And then that was sort of the majority of the things that I was auditioning for. Although my first gig was a regional production of To Kill a Mockingbird. So I started working in theater before I started working in film, but I think it just sort of, it was never something that I thought about at that time, kind of, what would I prefer to be working? And I was just psyched whenever anyone said that, they wanted me in whatever the hell they were doing.
Well, just to stay in that time frame that you were talking about, you said somebody caught notice of you around 9 or 10. Was that to get more into stage play, or is that when you got the agent? Was that when the film stuff started? That
was when the film stuff started.
Okay.
I along with the theatrical stuff, I didn't, I didn't start working professionally until I got an agent. Everything I was doing up until that point was either the stuff I was doing with Michael's company or acting classes. I think at the time I was at the Lee Strasberg School in New York, which I don't know what Strasberg's techniques do to a 10-year-old, but I guess they did something. And before then I was at the neighborhood playhouse when I was like, I guess, 9. So then it's Meisner for a 9-year-old. I think it certainly got me interested and sort of obsessive about the idea that this is an extremely subjective skill set, but a skill set nonetheless, and something that you can just endlessly refine, which is something I love about it, that it's just this kind of endless process to get better at it.
After you got the agent and you started going out to auditions, what was that experience like for you as a child? Are there any particularly memorable moments from an audition that really stuck with you, maybe as a learning experience or a negative?
I think encountering the business side of acting, or the idea of performing as an industry at that age, definitely taught some of the wrong lessons. I think things that I spent then, like my adult years, unlearning. The most obvious, I think, being is like my first interaction with other actors, for the most part, professionally, was in an audition room, which means I saw them as competition because, I'm sitting next to the people who are vying for the same part that I want. And even if the character or the piece isn't something that connects with you on a really deep level, sort of like with anything else, the fact that other people want it or other people might get it does most of the work in terms of attaching you to it. So it took me many years to sort of unlearn that other actors are not my competition and are in fact my collaborators. So I think being introduced to auditioning as a kid, yes, it puts you in a weird state. And it sort of teaches you that there is this is a game of, I guess, for lack of a better word, like winners and losers, which again is not the way I look at it today at all, but it's certainly the way that I looked at it as a child. In terms of specific stories, the only one that comes to mind is musical theater auditions, which I used to do growing up, are specifically brutal. The way that part of the industry teaches or treats, people in the chorus, or there's just I don't know if you've seen Chorus Line, but there's a cutthroat attitude to it that, while present in film and TV, is just for some reason worse in musical theater. And I just remember waiting for a long, long time to go into some audition and getting, like 1 or 2 people before it was finally my time to go in. And just before my name was up, the casting director popped their head out of the room and just said, "Hey, we saw what we needed. Everyone can go home now." And I just remember being like sort of devastated. Just like, oh wow, my time doesn't mean anything at all. Shit. But for the most part, I nothing especially negative. I don't. Thankfully, I don't really have any horror stories about casting directors or directors or producers being cruel or bullying or anything like that.
No, we weren't asking for dirt so much as just, you kind of said it, lessons were learned that you had to unlearn, and it's good on you to have like a different perspective having done this from adolescence to adulthood. But kind of similarly, nothing bad, but do you actually remember a moment where maybe you landed that first major role, whether in TV or film, and how that felt as a kid?
I don't, I think there were. Sure. I remember, at that age, I would always basically hear it through my parents, or like we'd all get on the phone with my agent at the time. And yeah, I remember, I mean, look, to this day, like, I'm really grateful that like, I still get really excited when I get a part, which again is something I'm really grateful for. I've yet to hit the point where I just sort of like, oh, another one, and sort of shrug. It's always a really exciting prospect because I know how much people put into these things. Any type of theatrical endeavor, if it's good, then it's a piece of someone's soul, whatever that means to you, whether it's the writer, the director, or whoever, like somebody put a portion of themselves into it. If it's good. If it sucks, then it might be because no one put any part of themselves into it. And the fact that somebody trusts you to take a part of them and run with it is always a really gratifying and humbling experience. So I always get really jazzed when I book anything. But I think as a kid, I just didn't. There was this sort of beautiful period growing up where I loved this with the passion that I do now, but I didn't have a concept of it as a career. Like the idea of like, oh, well, you can make a living doing this, you can make a living for kids, for family, you could support people, you can support yourself, or you cannot. And the odds are overwhelming that you won't be able to support yourself. None of that was present at all when I was, 12, 13, like, even though I was working and getting paid, it didn't register because I didn't have any bills and I lived with my parents. And there wasn't this thought of like, oh, if I do this movie, how does that affect my abilities to do the next one? Or what if people don't like it? Or is this a good representation of my ideals as a performer? Or is this a character that I really vibe with? It was just sort of like, well, this is a chance to act. So like, of course I'm going to do that. And that was a really beautiful perspective. I don't think there's a way to forget that this is a career now, but I often find myself trying to reconnect with that perspective of just sort of like doing it for the love of the game with no concept that you can build a life around it, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I think one of my follow-ups was going to be, at what point did you feel like you believed that it could be your career? Where the fantasy of just like, oh, I'm just acting, I'm having fun, suddenly starts transitioning to, this is what I do for a living.
I think probably like somewhere in high school, because I went to a performing arts high school. And so I grew up I was either on set with performers and artists, or I was in school with performers and artists. That's always been the majority of my community. And when my high school it's the same school as the middle school I went to. So there were a lot of us that started going to school together at 11 or 12, and then were still in class together by the time we were 17, 18. So it was people that I literally grew up with. And there was a time probably like the last 2 years of high school, where I saw a lot of my friends just sort of like kind of lose interest in this as a career, or maybe not lose interest in performing, but the idea of, okay, well, now am I going to go to college? If I go to college, am I going to study performance? If I study performance, is that something I want to take beyond college? Like those questions started to get asked. Or am I just going to like study something else? Study medicine or engineering or any other things that you can get training for. So I think at that point, and that was never a question for me. I mean, I remember growing up and people asking me like, well, what's your plan B? This isn't something that most people can make a living in. So what are you going to do if this doesn't work out for you? And I never had an answer for them. I just sort of said, I guess I'll die or something. But I don't know what to tell you. This is it for me. So I think when you're a kid, I feel like everything that you like is it for you. You know, and all the stakes are always sort of life and death when you're a kid. But I think I don't know when it was, but there was a point sometime in high school where I realized that that's not what it is for everybody. And it is that for me. So I guess I'm locked into this shit. And then also I technically went to college. I started going to NYU, and then within 6 weeks, I dropped out because it was just really clear that like there's only one thing I want to be doing, and it's not going to class every day. So so somewhere around, 16, 17, 18, I realized like, no, this is my life, for better or for worse.
No, understood. And just based on your last three answers or so, just showing, it's great you still get a charge out of it, that when you get a role, and I like the perspective you said about you really are taking someone's soul and working with it in a way, and like you still get the magic of it and all, and that's really good. I'm really starting to wonder, are you a real child actor? You seem way too well adjusted.
I am. I got the benefit of like just two unbelievable parents who just always supported, still do, always encouraged me, but never put any expectations on me. There was none of that, like, let me live vicariously through my kid shit. There was no, you got to do this for you, but maybe it's really for me. It was all love and support and something that I could share with them because they're both massive fans of film and TV and theater and music. And so I just, I was never like, this can be a sort of weirdly lonely profession. And I never felt alone in it. So I think that helped quite a lot. And they're both, I don't know, they're both wildly intelligent. So they gave me a love and respect for self-education and reading and just, I don't know, filling my brain up with things that validated me and made me feel like a worthwhile person apart from the industry. Because I think that's something that fucks with a lot of kids growing up in this and not that I escaped this completely, I certainly didn't, but the idea that your worth as a person is built on whether or not you get hired and whether or not the industry pats you on the head and says, hey man, you're a special little guy. I was lucky enough to have people in my life that made me feel worthwhile, irrespective of whether or not I was successful. And I think that protected me from a lot of pretty dark shit.
No, good to hear. And props to Mom and Dad Paolo for sure for everything. What would you say are some of the key differences between film, TV acting, and theater acting? And like, is there a discipline that maybe film actors could use from stage actors and vice versa, if that applies? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's really just, the work is the same. The medium changes. TV, I think now means something different to all of us than it did 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, So the biggest difference obviously is just time commitment, which film, at its highest is you could shoot something for a year and a half, but that's massive budget and that's rare. Most indie films are shot between, I'd say like 14 and 22 days at this point. And then most films a little bit more money, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. That's sort of the range you're working in. Anywhere all the way up to like 9 months, I guess. Whereas TV can go on for years. So again, it's the same work. The biggest difference with television is that you just don't, unless it's a miniseries, you don't know the end of the story. And in film and theater, you do know the end of the story. You know where your character ends up. So there's a beauty in television in the sense that you don't, part of the work as an actor is to try to forget or pretend you've forgotten that you don't know what the next line in the script is. That what's happening to you is happening to you for the first time, even if it's the 8th take. The beauty of theater is that you're not redoing anything. You redo the show, but every time you do the show, it's the one time that you have that experience. And it's performed in sequence, unlike film and TV, which for budget reasons and time reasons is shot almost always out of sequence. So you have to track your emotional development as a character even when you're shooting the results of moments that you haven't performed yet. which is a difficult dance and why rehearsal really comes in handy. Whereas in theater, you get to just follow the natural arc of the story. You don't have to pretend that something hasn't happened yet. But then there's also the fact that in theater you have to work with different elements of your body, in the sense that like you can't rely on your eyes to the same extent that you can on screen. On screen, if your character's lying about something, maybe all you need to do is shift your eyes from down to the left once, and the audience goes, "Oh, they're full of shit. Look at that." Whereas on stage, you can't do that. You have to do something else. That's why there's more dialogue on stage, because you have to tell people the story in a way that you can't do with your face. So I found lessons on from both. I think the biggest lesson that I learned in theater is just stamina, is knowing how to like drill the same things. And I rehearse most movies if I have the time, like I'm rehearsing a play. So I try to get it ready enough that if I had to do the whole movie in one interrupted take, I could. Might not be the ideal way to shoot it, but I could do it without falling apart. So I guess that's sort of the biggest thing I took from theater is in theater, that's how you rehearse your characters, to do it all in one stretch. And there's something about that still gives me a lot of comfort.
Yeah, you talked about the differences between kind of all three of those mediums, film, TV, and theater, from an acting perspective. And at the top of this, you also mentioned like film as just a medium you love, that sort of tight 2-ish hour storytelling experience as well. But do you have a preference, in terms of, as a performer, what you love most in terms of performing in? Or does it really just depend on the character, the circumstances, or you like the variety of hopping back and forth between all those different mediums?
I've enjoyed a variety of going back and forth. I don't do anywhere near as much theater now as I would like to. But there is something unbelievably special about being on stage, because the call and response, not literally, but energetically, between the audience is a very real thing. So when something profound happens on stage, whether scripted or not, when something actually moves people, you can feel it. You can feel it in the room. When something actually makes them laugh, they laugh. They gasp, they cry, like you can hear them and you can feel them. And that is pretty intoxicating. It sort of moves through you. And even when you're staying in the scene and trying very hard to not step outside yourself and become aware that you're performing a show, the feeling of the audience really feeds you. However, you can have the same thing happen on a film set. Which is why I love films so much, because you can still get that from the crew. When shit's really cooking, obviously the crew's all doing their job, but a lot of the crew's job is preparation, right? They're setting up the shots, they're getting the lights going, and then once the camera's rolling, most of the crew doesn't have to do anything in that moment. The people that still do are the ACs and the DP and the sound people, but set dressing, ADs, basically everybody else is just sort of standing there watching for the moment that we're rolling. And there is still that feeling on a set when stuff is really cooking, where you're feeding off the energy of your audience. So I think my preference, yes, is contextual, but I think will sort of always be film, because it's like summer camp. You have to meet this complete group of strangers, and then over the course of a couple weeks or a couple months, trust them with your art, with your life, with your vulnerability, with your career, and developing that bond with people is super cool. It's so easy to fall in love with that experience and with a community like that. And it's just a really cool thing to have so many different people with so many different disciplines who are all hopefully really, really good at their specific art form, all working on this joint effort. And then this really palpable feeling that, if we fail together. And if we succeed, we all succeed together. And again, you get that in film and TV too. There's just something, or in theater and TV as well, there's just something about the limited time period of film that I really feed off of. Like, we only have 4 weeks to get this thing right. And then we just run out of money and it's over. And I like that. I like that pressure. It's a lot of fun for me.
I think the summer camp analogy is perfect, or like cramming for an all-nighter.
Exactly.
You know, when you're that camaraderie when you're studying, like we got to get it now or never kind of a thing.
Exactly. Yeah, this is it.
For sure. And, you know, because speaking of that sort of sense of community, you might be aware that in the Paper Street House, we love our horror movies. Big genre nerds. Did notice you were in a string of horror movies kind of following 2010-ish, including STAKELAND, which I love, is a great kind of indie apocalyptic vampire movie. Were you in several genre films by happenstance, or are you yourself a fan of the genre?
I'm a huge fan of horror. Horror's got this, like, it has this very specific power that I don't think any other storytelling medium has, which is to play this wonderful magic trick on you. If it does it right and it hits you in the right part of your feels, where you lose a sense of safety that you had before you interacted with the story. You know, like you woke up and you lived your day, and then you go to the cinema and you watch, I don't know, Rosemary's Baby or something, and then all of a sudden you go home to your apartment and the hallway feels unsafe now. And you know that nothing's changed. You know the reason you feel unsafe is because you saw this movie. And you know logically that it makes no sense that for some reason seeing the movie has now invited in, you know, dark energies to your life, but you're still uncomfortable. And I think that's amazing. That good horror is powerful enough to just let you mindfuck yourself for days, weeks, potentially years. There are certain horror movies that fuck people up for their entire lives. And that power fascinates me. So yeah, I've always been a fan of the genre. But no, that was just sort of a coincidence. It was, you know, and STAKELAND, when I read that, I didn't even realize it was a horror movie. Like, I guess because it had vampires in it, it fits the genre. But when I read that, I was like, what a sad, like, father-son road movie this is. I read that as like a Cormac McCarthy novel. It was only after we made the film that I was like, oh, it's a horror movie. Like, interesting. And then I guess then I did Friend Request after that. Like, no, I'm always just sort of interested in, like, you know, if I can find something to glom onto in a script or a character, I'll do it irrespective of genre, just because I love to film things. I like to act. And then B, I just think I get better, or I hope I get better every time I do it, because I learn something. I meet another actor, I meet a director, I meet a fucking AD, or like there are always people on set that I learn something from. So I try to perform as much as I can, because I think it's it's like anything else you want to be good at. You just have to do it a lot.
You get to Carnegie Hall, exactly.
Yeah, you gotta, and you know, we as actors don't have. Yeah, we can practice in the way a violinist, with the Carnegie Hall example, can practice alone in our rooms, in the way that an artist can paint or a writer can write. But there's something about performing that's hard to replicate if you don't have someone watching. You can do it. Obviously, a lot of rehearsal takes place alone. But in terms of, like, for lack of a better phrase, level up your craft, you kind of have to do it in front of people. I've always been a huge martial arts fan. And I like training martial arts, and like I'm obsessed with Bruce Lee. So like, part of that I think is because he's this union of actor and martial artist. And there's a lot of, I think, comparisons to fighting in acting, because you have a scene partner or who hopefully isn't your competitor or your enemy, but you are taking and giving to them, and there is a back and forth. And just like in fighting, you practice your movements and your forms, but you never really know if you can fight until you fight somebody. Just training by yourself alone with a bag is never going to teach you how to react when someone is swinging at you. And beyond that, if you start thinking about your training in the middle of a fight, if you're sparring with someone or fighting someone, you start thinking, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this like 1-2 combo and then I'll throw a kick, you're probably going to get hit. The idea is to train so much that your body takes over. You don't have to think, you can just react. And I feel exactly the same about performing, that you practice and you train and you rehearse, also that in the moment when you're actually doing the scene, you're not thinking, you're just reacting. So I like, so all that to say you need a dance partner. It's really hard to get better as an actor, I think, without performing with and for people.
No, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. You did mention trying to find like a nugget or something to glom onto with characters. Was there something with the part of Corey, to segue a little bit into Creature Was Stirring? Was it something about Corey? Was it something with the family holiday dynamic or more of the genre elements that drew you to that particular role?
I liked Corey. I thought he was funny and really weird. So when I read it, I was just like, oh, I like this dude. There's something wrong with him, but I dig it. And I liked that in the genre, oftentimes characters sort of have to act a bit dense to their situation in order for the plot to progress. Because if everyone just sort of goes, this shit seems bad, we're leaving, then the movie doesn't happen. So oftentimes you need characters to sort of ignore their better instincts in order for things to progress. And Corey just seemed to be the one character in the movie that was reacting to things the way that I would, which is like, all right, this is ridiculous. All of it seems bad. And if we have to freeze to death to get out of here, we probably should. So I sort of, I connected with that. And then I just thought that, no one writes like Shannon. Shannon has such a unique style to the way that he builds story and his dialogue that I was just sort of fascinated to get inside his head. And then, when I met Damien, we had a conversation. I really liked him, and I loved his commitment to the form. And so, all the things that stack up on it. And I had worked with Annalise Basso before. I knew how talented she was and what a lovely person she is. And we hadn't worked together, but I'd met Scout Compton just through friends in LA, and I knew she was a lovely person, really talented. So there were just a lot of things where I was like, yeah, why not? I'd love to work with these people. But yeah, it just started with, I read it and I don't know, I liked Corey. I thought he was funny.
Nice. When you worked with Scout Taylor Compton, did you come up with like certain dynamics as siblings that you played? Like, did you influence each other's performances at all?
I think so. Not intentionally. Again, it's always really important for me if I can, everyone has their own process, but I like to get to know my co-stars as best I can, because the more I know them, the more I trust them, the more I can feel safe giving of myself. And and Scout is just such a warm, generous, inviting human being. I mean, she just sort of immediately was like, let's hang out, let's do this, let's go on this trip. And so that the sibling dynamic was really easy to cultivate. And she's a really just caring human being. So sort of being her younger brother or falling into that role where like she's going to mom you, but with love was really easy. So I give her credit for most of that, because she was just she's very open about, hey, let's spend some time together, like let's be friends, which really helps in any of those type of dynamics.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you're going to go into an action or a horror film that maybe has some more physicality or just really intense emotions at work, is there any type of special preparation you do? Do you need to be by yourself for a week beforehand or after? What is that experience like putting yourself in that really intense, vulnerable position?
It varies. It's sort of about like what the it's about what time I have. So with Creature Was Stirring, when I signed on to that, I was filming in Colombia, and then I got back and I think I had like 3 or 4 days before I had to leave to Kentucky to do that. So my space to prepare that was really limited. Obviously I'd always like more time if I can have it, but sometimes that's just not the way it goes. So it varies based on the actual time you have. And then B, I've always been, I don't know, I think I've always been a sort of I guess I have my rituals and I have my like totems and my preparation methods that I think I generally return to, but I also can be pretty fluid, and I tend to prepare characters in the way that I think they would prepare were they an actor, if that makes sense. And there are certain characters that if they were an actor, they would read every book on the subject or around the world, and they would study this and they would build this. And there are other characters that sort of would do very little and would kind of just be way more focused on the clothing or the aesthetic. And I sort of wind up following the path that I think the character would follow. The one thing I always do is build a playlist, not of music that I think the character would necessarily listen to, because the character might have very different tastes than I do, and music's really important for me, so I want to be able to emotionally connect with it. So what I do is I build a playlist of songs that maybe the character would fuck with, but more that make me feel the way that I interpret the character walking around and feeling. And some people walk around very angry all the time. Some people walk around confused or scared or foggy or, any other adjective you want to use. So I try to find music that puts me in the mind state that I think that person lives in. But if, I don't know, in terms of like, well, this is something with really high stakes, or it's, someone's in a really emotionally vulnerable place, I don't know that there's anything I do more than just, I try to go through, if there are really big emotional moments in the script, I try to sit with those and experience those on my own, just so that I'm familiar with that feeling before we get on set. So it's not something that I can't control, because it's one thing to conjure up fear and sadness and anger, and it's another thing to conjure it up and then sort of direct it in the best way, so that you're not, if you get yourself to a state where you're so hysterical that you can't do another take, that doesn't help anybody. So you always have to be able to control whatever you're going through.
No, it's sound advice. We'll follow up with some advice here at the end of this, but I will say, Last Stop in Yuma County played like gangbusters at South by Southwest. I know a handful of folks, including some of Paper Street, got to see the screening there and all came away loving it. Was this a project that came across your radar? Was this a cold audition? How did this one land in your lap?
This was just something that was sent to me through the normal audition channels, and then I read it and I loved it. So I read for it, and then I had a meeting with Francis where we just, the director, where we just sort of, we shot the shit for, I don't know, an hour or so. And then he said, hey, man, I want to make the movie with you, which obviously made me really happy because I wanted to make the movie with him. And then when I got on set, it just, you always hope that what you do is going to be good, obviously. But then sometimes you get a vibe for a film, and you just feel like, man, if this goes the way I think it's going to go, this could be pretty special. And that was sort of the vibe we all had while making it. And then I saw it and I was like, oh man, he did exactly what I was hoping he'd do with it. So I'm really proud of everybody's work on that, and I'm really proud of Francis but honestly everybody, like that took so many people's effort. So I just, hats off to everyone that put that film together. But Francis is a special dude. He's going to do some really cool shit.
Yeah, I have no doubt we're going to hear his name more down the road here. We've kind of, when I teased about asking for some advice for aspiring actors, you've given many nuggets of wisdom here as a very level-headed child actor, as we've mentioned. But do you have any kind of general wisdom or specific wisdom or advice maybe for any aspiring actors out there?
Yeah, if you want to do it, then do it and never stop. Unless you really want to, then stop, sure. But you're gonna be given every reason to quit. Just never do it, and then I think you'll probably be okay. Because anything else is too personal. There's I could tell someone like every technique I've ever used that has helped me do this or that, and none of that shit might work for them. So I don't, I'm not an acting teacher, and I don't fancy myself one. That's a skill set I don't have. But the one thing I can tell people is just like, if this is what you need to do with your life, then you're always going to need to do it. It won't go away. If you need to be an artist, if you need to perform, then you'll always need to do that. You can either do it, or you can try and convince yourself that you don't need it, but then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So obviously you have to have opportunities, and it's one thing to just say like, yeah, I'm going to do it, and then be able to have the, again, the opportunities to do that. And if you live in a small town where they don't cast things, like I know it can be a lot harder than I had it growing up in New York City. So I'm sympathetic to all of that, but I just don't stop. Just keep doing it, because I think it's a worthwhile way to spend your life.
Words of wisdom indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, A Creature Was Stirring you could find on VOD platforms to rent or buy right now. And if you find it near you right now, The Last Stop in Yuma County is also playing in theaters.
It officially drops on the 10th.
As you're hearing this, you'll be able to get it on VOD.
Bingo.
We're going to move into the second section of this here interview. We call it the Rapid Fire 15. I gave Connor a little bit of a heads up. It's a smidge like the Proust questionnaire off of Inside the Actor Studio, but we've kind of been trying to tailor it to Connor's taste and what we've learned about him. So the rules are, there are no rules. Just first thing that comes to mind, it's not a cool test. There's no points. Like, whose line is it anyway? Just more about kind of some stuff we think you might like. And our off-air conversations revealed many other things you like. So I wish I had a wrestling question in here. All right. Number 1, what movie do you think you have seen the most in your life?
Jaws.
No hesitation.
Yeah.
Love it.
And speaking of movies you said that can influence people for decades, that one sure did.
Damn right.
Question 2. Is there a movie, a show, a song that always makes you emotional and brings you to tears?
Oh God, many. You Can't Not Cry at the End of Braveheart. There's a song by Mark Knopfler and James Taylor called Sailing to Philadelphia. And there is a line that James Taylor spits, if you can call it that, where he says, "A Geordie and a baker's boy in the forests of the Iroquois." And for some reason, that line makes me cry and gives me chills every time I hear it. Also, the first 15 minutes of Tarzan are just devastating and will always be.
Given an age range, if you weren't sure about how old Connor is, if the Disney Tarzan tore him up.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, the Phil Collins, man. The Phil Collins hits so hard in that movie.
It does. It does.
The Rosie O'Donnell hits a different way in that movie. But yeah, question 3. What is the first film that really scared you, stuck with you, gave you nightmares?
I know that the trailer for I Know What You Did Last Summer fucked me up as a kid. I know that. What film did I see that really gave me nightmares and stuck with me? I'm sure there's one that comes before this, but the one, when I first saw The Ring, I was really messed up for a while. I was like, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, something like that. Maybe 13 when that came out. So I know there was stuff before that, but the American, the Gore Verbinski Ring, like that fucked me up.
Yeah, it fucked up a lot of people.
I used to have a TV under my bed. I slept in a loft bed growing up, and there was a TV on my dresser underneath it. It was there for me to play video games. So it was, didn't get any channels. It was just connected it with an aux cable. And so if you didn't have anything connected to it and it went on, it was always snow, like in The Ring. And it sometimes would just go on because... So I remember after seeing that movie and being up in my loft bed, and then in the reflection of my window, seeing the TV just go, which was just, at that age, I probably didn't know, just like, maybe you should just unplug it, you idiot. But I never did. I just suffered.
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. All right, question 4. What is your favorite horror movie franchise?
Favorite horror movie franchise? I haven't seen the third installment yet, but no shit, it's the fucking Maxine saga.
Nice.
I don't know what happens with Maxine, but from Pearl and X, that shit that wins for me.
I'm all in for Maxine. Haven't seen it, just the trailer, but I can tell I'm going to love it.
Yeah.
All right. Similarly, what's your favorite horror movie subgenre?
Subgenre. Okay. So like, you mean slasher?
Yeah, like body horror, possession. Yeah.
What's my favorite?
Or maybe what's the one that always works on you or like does the trick as far as...
So It doesn't have a lot, but and again, this might not be fair because I'm sure there's more in a different genre that would fit. But the answer I'm going to give is the film that I saw most recently that really disturbed me last year is a film called Speak No Evil. I think it's Danish, but don't quote me on that. That film takes place in a subgenre of horror that I would call the fear of failing your family. Film like Nocturnal Animals exists in this genre. Peckinpah's Straw Dogs would exist in this genre. Basically, the idea is the danger is made unimaginably obvious, and yet in your effort to sort of be polite, to uphold the mores of society, to not acknowledge the danger that's around you for fear of escalating that danger, you just allow your family to be brutalized. And there's something about that subgenre of horror that is so frightening. I guess because it doesn't rely on supernatural stuff, it plays with the fear of inaction, which is something that is a really scary thing to think about, of just like, oh, this very clear danger is threatening me and the people I love, and yet I'm paralyzed. So I'm going to say that's my favorite genre.
I like it.
A unique answer. I don't think anybody's ever said that before, but I totally get what you mean because you can see yourself in that situation. And you were correct. It is a Danish film. But it's a Danish and a Dutch couple in it. So everyone's always like, wait, was it Dutch or was it a Danish film? Because it uses both languages.
The really interesting thing about that genre also is that, and this is very much the case in Speak No Evil, is it oftentimes has you as the audience not, I wouldn't say empathizing with the villains who are brutalizing your protagonists, but I find, at least for myself, in an effort to distance myself from the behavior of the protagonist, so in order for me to be like, well, I would never let someone get away with that, you wind up, or I'll speak for myself, I wind up in a place that by the end of the movie, I'm almost rooting for the villains to win because I don't want to identify with the protagonists because I'm so afraid of that identification. And I think that psychological sort of bait and switch is really cool. And every time I experience one of those movies, I have that reaction and I go, oh my God, like, why am I rooting for these people to be brutalized? And I have to remind myself, it's like, well, because you really want to show yourself that you're not them, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Hadn't thought about it from that perspective. All right, now switching gears, something a little lighter. Question 6. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Pink Ranger in Power Rangers. Apologies to the actress. I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, but
like Amy Jo Johnston, is that right?
That's it. There you go. Yeah,
you're welcome.
That would definitely be her.
I knew you would know. I knew you would know, Sean. I knew you'd know the actress's name.
Can't think of another one right now, but if you put me on the spot on just one, I probably would have been able to pull it.
You know, one thing I will say, and this has stayed true to this day, and thankfully I found myself in this business, is that I even as a little kid, it's like even then, I didn't have a crush on Amy Jo Johnson. I had a crush on Kimberly. And that's always been the case with me. It was never a celebrity crush. It was a character that they played that I was super into.
No, I get that. The character can't let you down like the real life person. You can only find out things.
There was never a celebrity that my crush like followed from role to role. It was always specific to that movie and that character that I fell in love with.
No, I gotcha. So switching up again, what's you've been able to travel around to some places, especially working in this industry. What's the favorite place you've ever visited or lived, and what's a place that's on the bucket list to visit?
I mean, I had a wonderful time in South Africa. I loved Cape Town, but I also, I mean, I think my favorite place to visit was probably Morocco. I was pretty young when I was shooting there. But I was old enough that I have pretty clear memories of it, and just the culture, the energy, the experience. I had never been to Africa at that point, so I loved working there. Had a great time shooting in Germany, but I guess in terms of like the vibe and just a different experience, I guess I would say Morocco. And then bucket list, honestly, like most places in Asia. I've never been to Asia, but I'd really love to shoot something in Japan, in Thailand, in the Philippines, in South Korea. Like there's a lot of Asia that I'd really love to work in. And again, I just haven't been to that part of the world yet. So I really want to go.
Well, hopefully you'll have the chance soon. Next question. Do you have a favorite film festival experience or a particularly great theatrical screening? Maybe not even your own movie. It could be your own movie, or just something where the audience was like really electric and buzzing.
I guess STAKELAND premiered at Toronto's like Midnight Madness section. So seeing it with that audience, at midnight, the big screen, but just like that crowd, especially for Midnight Madness, was just, my memory, that was sick. Like it was getting to see the movie with literally everyone that that movie was built for, that was a great experience. I remember that. I'm going to go with that one.
No wrong answers here. And again, it's always cool to see a genre movie with genre fans. There's something special about knowing your audience and then reacting positively toward it. So in a similar vein, do you have a favorite concert you've attended or maybe a very memorable concert experience?
Oh, fuck yeah. So I've seen him a couple times, but I got to see Springsteen when he was doing his Broadway set. And that was one of the best live shows, not of just music, but like of any live theatrical experience I've ever seen. Him with an acoustic guitar and a piano in a, relatively small theater, especially for his audiences, and him doing the opposite of the way that we usually interact with Springsteen, which is with bombast and a bunch of people on stage and just sort of overwhelming energy. To see him intimate and stripped down and just telling stories about his life and the events that led up to the songs in the set list of that show was a pretty wild experience. But then also, one of my favorite bands is the Gaslight Anthem. And literally every time I've seen them perform, it has been just a bop. Brian Fallon is a brilliant performer. And then I got to see the Chromatics last show. They're sadly no longer making music together. They did a show in LA maybe 3.5 years ago or so with Desire was opening for them. And I'm a massive fan of Chromatics and sort of everything that is on the label. Italians do it better. So to get to see them, I'd seen them live before, but to get to see them at one of their last shows and with a lot of people from that label was great. And they played a fucking Springsteen song. So like, I just got both things. And the Gaslight Anthem is always quoting Springsteen. So like maybe Bruce is just, maybe the boss is the connective tissue.
Yeah.
You can't have Jersey connections and not quote.
True, yeah, my whole family's from Jersey and Central Jersey at that. So Jesus.
I'm a big time Gaslight fan too. Sink or Swim's probably a top 10 album for me.
Yeah, man, they're so good. I'm glad they're back. I'm going to see them in August because
I was able to catch them in LA on their reunion tour last year.
We may have been at the same show because I was at the show they did on that tour in LA at the Palladium.
Palladium. Yep, we were there.
Hell yeah.
Love that.
Very nice.
Another music related one for you. What is your go-to karaoke song? Even if you don't do karaoke, what song would you do?
He's an actor. There's never been an actor on the show that says, "Oh, I don't do karaoke."
And a theater kid, not just an actor, a theater kid.
It is either Higher or With Arms Wide Open. As long as it's free, it slays.
Love that.
I was not half expecting him to have like a musical theater deep cut, but that Creed works.
No, I just the Scott Stapp lives within us all, and
as someone from Central Florida, dirt rocker music is a part of my DNA, unfortunately, and we were there watching them play before they hit big, and it's not a brag. I'm just letting you guys know it's a fact. I was watching Creed before they got signed.
We all created our own prison here, so
Exactly.
I respect your sacrifice. My sacrifice? That was close. I was trying. Damn it.
That was good.
So, last music one. Actually, no, there's a couple more. What would be, because you may have already said the song, we may not. What would be your entrance music? And you know wrestling. We've talked about that off air too. What would be your walkout music if you had to get the crowd hyped up to come out to introduce something or a TED Talk?
That is a fantastic question. I think I certainly would want to vary it 100%. The fact that both Israel Adesanya and now Michael Venom Page have come out to the Undertaker theme song is amazing. And I'm waiting for someone to come out to Shawn Michaels' theme song because it seems obvious to me. For some reason, my heart's telling me that I should come out to something by the Bloodhound Gang. And I think, I forget the song. I think it's called No Hard Feelings. It's the one where the refrain is, ain't my job to fuck you on your birthday anymore. I think that's the entrance music. I couldn't tell you why, but I just think Bloodhound Gang makes sense.
Yep, that's the right song. And that's always, for some reason, whenever I do karaoke with my friends, somebody's going to do a Bloodhound Gang song every time.
They have a lot more bangers than one would expect.
It's usually Tracy Lane. It's usually Tracy Lane.
It goes way deeper than that touch.
All right. So you play a little bit of guitar, I believe.
I do.
Do you have a favorite guitarist or favorite band instead, if you want to swap it out?
I have a favorite bands. Favorite guitarist is Keith Richards. He's just done all of the things that I would ask of someone. In terms of, people, not that Keith isn't still doing it, but just newer contributors, I'm a huge fan of Gary Clark Jr.'s guitar work. I think he's really special. And then also, I'm completely forgetting his name right now, but the guy behind War on Drugs, I love his guitar work as well. But yeah, it's Keith Richards.
Very nice. I can't pull that guy's name either. You said you are now a resident of the Los Angeles County. But what is one thing you do miss the most about New York City? Is there something, whether it's food or otherwise, that you always are yearning for back from New York?
Yeah, discovery. In LA, you don't really you don't find things in the same way because you're not wandering around. You're not, if you're in your car, you're rarely, if ever, going to see something and pull over and be like, check out this shop. I was just driving, if you're in your car, it's because you want to get wherever the fuck you're going. But in New York, on the way home from somewhere, going somewhere, there was always time to sort of discover something and be like, what the fuck is that? I want to go in there. And that's really hard in LA because LA was built by demons who have no interest in creating a pedestrian or walkable friendly environment. They want us all atomized and dying in our cars. So it doesn't.
When he's telling lies.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's I don't know, the only area you can really sort of wander. There are parts of Santa Monica, obviously Venice, the Boardwalk or Larchmont Village, but beyond that, there just really aren't places, and there are a couple places in the Valley or Toluca Lake where you can there's walking friendly shops, Main Street type vibes, but it's really few and far between.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of tragic.
And to your point, they're all sprawled so far away from each other. Yeah. So it's still just little strips, little districts. There's no communal center.
Every time I'm in New York, and even discovery doesn't have to be window shopping, right? It's just discovery of experience. Whenever I'm in New York, I remember last time I was there, because I'm there many times a year to visit my family and to see friends. And a friend of mine from LA had asked me to pick her up some coffee from a very specific coffee shop in New York. And then my folks live up in Harlem, so I was on the Lower East Side of the city to pick up this coffee, and then it was just, I don't know, it was a beautiful day, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna walk back to Harlem. And then that becomes, a good part of the day is that walk, 100 plus blocks uptown, and you just, again, that's, I don't know, it feels different in LA. I've certainly had moments where I'm driving somewhere and I'm I'm gonna take the long way, but it's just, it feels different,
No, 100%. I always describe that whenever I'm in LA. I'm like, the downtown doesn't actually feel like a downtown of a major urban center at all.
Our downtown is post-apocalypse. It is late stage capitalism. The downtown it is after the bomb has dropped.
Exactly. Led by demons.
Led by demons. Yeah.
With a draft house, but that's about the only thing to go down there for.
All right. Penultimate question. Question 14. If you could program a double feature of any two films in the world to let people know a little bit about you, maybe your two wolves, if you will, or just two films you really love that would work so well as a double feature, however you want to position it, what would your Connor Paolo double feature be?
Great question. I mean, I'm a big fan of the New Beverly, so I'm studying the art of the double feature now for years. They did, the last show I saw at the New Beverly was just The Raid and then The Raid 2, which I don't know if you can structure a better double feature than those two movies. But if I was trying to let people know something about me, I guess I'd make them watch, I don't know what order, maybe you guys can help me with that, but it would be, Jaws is my favorite film, so I would have to show that. And then I think I'd also make them watch This Is Spinal Tap. I just don't know which one goes first. Maybe Spinal Tap goes first?
I think you have it right, because Jaws is a meal. And he makes a meal out of people. But then you do you want to chase it with something a little lighter, maybe. Even though that movie ends with a little hopeful bit where they swim away.
Yeah, I think you start with Jaws, you let them relax, and then we give them. Yeah.
I agree.
Becky might just
I agree. I totally agree. It was my kind of first thought because Spinal Tap definitely feels more midnighty.
Yes, you can be up later for Spinal Tap for sure. So I think that would be my double feature. Yeah. Although the last time I hosted a movie night with friends, it was my turn to pick the film, and I wound up showing everybody Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, Sidney Lumet's last film, which is just unending human misery. So I don't know if I'm the best instructor.
That's the kind, you show them that and you chase it with Hot Rod or something. You gotta.
Yeah, everyone just looked at me. Why the fuck did you pick this? I was like, it's good. It's good acting. I don't know what to tell you. Look at Philip doing his thing. It's good, I don't know.
No, I got you. It's still a good answer. And again, Jaws is a good enough movie that it could be the last movie in a double feature and still work. But yeah, I think that's a good twofer. I like it. And finally, to end this Rapid Fire 15, we will ask you, Connor Paolo, what would be your dream role? Is there an original characters or fictional character of an IP, or is there a historical figure maybe whose story you would love to bring to life?
This is I've been asked this question before. It's difficult. I don't really know. I guess the best thing I could think of is if John Wick was somehow in an Aaron Sorkin written drama. So directed The Social Network, but there's also 45 minutes of just unbelievable action choreography. That's what I want. I want to be in high, very well written, very well directed, just deep drama, but also a lot of people get roundhouse kicked, which I guess I'm describing the Patrick Swayze Roadhouse. So maybe
I love this. I'd see this movie. I'm in.
It's I guess imagine Roadhouse if it won all the Oscars. That's what I want to do.
I like this alternate reality. I'm here for it.
Well, he mentioned he loves martial arts, and now the way he's talking, I picture him being like Emil Hirsch in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's always out on the porch, practicing his Bruce Lee moves.
Yes.
He's just waiting for that call that hey man, we have a really heady action movie where you get to kick and then spouse monologues.
Yes.
I'm in. Me and Cam or me and Becky or some combo thereof will get to writing this one because there needs to be this movie because we all love these genres.
Yeah, we've been close a couple times, but again, this was one of Bruce Lee's sort of life goals, was to create, and this was sort of what he was going for with Enter the Dragon and then with Game of the Death, which was to create a great movie that stood up with or without the martial arts, and then to have the martial arts on top of that. So I would love to see that. Not that John Wick isn't fucking perfect. It is. I'm not blaspheming. I'm talking about something different.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned The Raid 2. It kind of sounds a little bit in that vein, right? Like The Godfather, but with sick action sequences, right?
No, I think that's what he was going for, and in some ways, I don't know, if you put 3 more Holdway fights in Old Boy, then that's basically what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Or honestly, Johnny Toe, if you haven't watched any of his films, his filmography, I would say kind of is fit in this bill.
I actually don't, but I'm going to look. This is the filmmaker, Johnny Toe, or the performer?
Filmmaker. Yeah.
Okay.
Hong Kong action movies. Great stuff.
I will check his stuff out.
Yeah.
Very nice. That concludes the Rapid Fire 15. You gave us some pretty great first-time answers, several first-time answers, too.
What we're here for.
But yeah, before we wrap up with you, a couple things. What is next for you? Is there anything you're able to promote beyond Last Stop in Yuma County or Creature, anything that's public yet?
I just finished a film literally 2 days ago, which I'm excited about, but that hasn't been announced yet, so I don't want to fuck with them. There's another film that I'm really, really excited about that also hasn't been announced yet, but that is done. So I don't. This hasn't been released yet, although it was at South by last year, but it's called The Young Wife, which is Tyresha Poe's second film, which I just think is phenomenal. I loved the film when I saw it at South by, and I loved the experience of making it. It's one of my favorite on-set experiences. I think everyone in it just knocks it out of the park, and I think the movie's really good. It's just like a really unique piece. So I don't know when that is coming out, but I do want people to see it whenever it rears its head. There's another film I have coming out at some point that it's completed called Seance, which is a writer-director named Vivian Keir's film. I don't know what the release status is on that either, and I haven't seen it, so I don't know much about it beyond that it was fun to make. But I can definitely recommend The Young Wife to people whenever that becomes available, because I think it's worth people's time.
Right. Well, is there a place we can direct folks to, whether it's social media or a website, that they can keep track of you for these other ones when they do get announced?
Yeah, I have an Instagram. You'll never. It's pretty boring to follow me. I don't really use it, but you are welcome to check it out. It's just my name at Instagram, and then I don't have a website, so that's probably the only way. And then just follow your local police scanner, because I'm sure I'll pop up there soon enough.
Dang. That's a sign off if I ever heard of one.
Yeah, isn't that ominous?
Not for crimes, because he's going to be applying his martial arts and the vigilante style justice.
Ooh, I like it. The
West LA area.
Yeah, but I don't really engage with social media much, so it's not the best way to keep track, but it's also the only way to keep track, I guess. So, and I don't know how many non-industry people really want to follow IMDb. I don't know.
I got you.
Much there for them.
Well,
but,
we'll tag in the show notes some stuff for Connor, be it his Instagram and other places. We find him, or at least links to the movies, if nothing else. So
exactly.
Again, Creature was Stirring, out now on VOD. As you're hearing this, The Last Stop in Yuma County, also out now on VOD as of May 10th. So definitely check those out. We are a fan of this gentleman. We are excited to see what he does in the future. We know a few of the things he can't talk about yet, but we look forward to working with him again down the road here.
Thanks, man. I look forward to the same.
Yeah, we had a blast talking with you. Also, we don't often have actors on here, so it's also really fun to deep dive and kind of learn a little bit more about your experience and how you prepare for roles. So just appreciate that perspective.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated the questions. They were really thoughtful. So I appreciate you giving up your time. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, Connor. Pleasure speaking with you. And don't forget to check out A Creature Stirring and Last Stop in Yuma County.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you so much for the time, Connor. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.